So, on behalf of the Complex South Research Network, I welcome you all to today's session. Thank you all for joining in today. My name is Sandeep Menon. I'm a landscape architect and I'm a faculty member at the Manchester School of Architecture and a proud member of the Complex South Network. I'll be your host for today. Before we begin, I'd like to present a small introduction to our research network. Complex South was founded as a collective to critically engage with the decolonial scholarship, a research and researcher dynamics in the urban transformations across the global south. Our network is intentionally interdisciplinary, bringing together a range of perspectives to look at how societies can transform in sustainable and context sensitive ways. The theme for today's webinar is Building Social Capital by Design. In our rapidly urbanizing world, most development projects are driven primarily by financial metrics, often overlooking the profound and lasting impacts these projects have on the social and environmental capital of communities. This webinar will focus on how cities and neighborhoods can be designed to nurture social connections, protect environmental resources, and build resilience in the face of growing global challenges. Innovative examples and actionable strategies to embed social capital at the heart of urban design will also be presented and discussed. Today, we have with us our guest speakers for the session, Dr. Geeta Mehta, adjunct professor of architecture and urban design at the Columbia University in New York, accompanied by Govardan Umashankar, senior urban designer at WXY Architecture and Urban Design, based in New York as well. Let me take this opportunity to introduce our speakers in detail. Dr. Geeta Mehta is an adjunct professor of architecture and urban design at Columbia University. She is a founder of Social Capital Initiatives, formerly known as Asia Initiatives, a non-profit organization that serves over 100,000 people annually in underserved communities by helping them revitalize neighborhoods and the environments. She is also the innovator of Social Capital Credits, a virtual currency for social good that has won the World Changing Idea Award from the Fast Company, as well as other accolades from MIT Solve, General Motors, Vodafone, and others. Dr. Mehta is also the co-founder of URBS, a user-generated cities initiative that supports community-led urban planning and development. She was recognized in the Forbes 50 over 50 Impact Makers list in 2024. She was also the Purpose Prize Fellow in 2023 and was also awarded by the Women's E-News as one of the 21 leaders in the 21st century in 2015. Dr. Mehta currently serves on the Management Policy Council conveyed by the President of the University of Tokyo and on the boards of the Center for the Living City and Women Strong International. She previously served on the New York City Mayor's Waterfront Management Advisory Board as a president of the American Institute of Architects Japan chapter and on the advisory board of the Millennium Cities Initiative at the Earth Institute of Columbia University. Her seventh book, Sustainable Cities for the Future, co-authored by her, was launched at the T20 G20 meetings in India in 2023. Welcome, Professor Mehta. It's a pleasure to have you on board today. Moving on to our second speaker, Govardan Umashankar, is a senior urban designer at WXY Architecture and Urban Design in New York, where he leads complex large-scale master planning projects. His work integrates urban design with neighborhood revitalization, resilience strategies, and the optimization of existing transportation and infrastructure networks. With a strong commitment to sustainability, accessibility, and community well-being, Govardan specializes in creating urban systems that are both equitable and sustainable. His practice is grounded in a deep interest in community integration and environmental stewardship, focusing on the dynamic relationships between the built environment, the public realm, and infrastructure systems. Govardan's passion for indigenous knowledge and ecological restoration has led him to initiate and support a community-driven effort in his hometown in Shivakashi in southern India. There he has been instrumental in reviving traditional water tank systems, advancing social equity and ecological resilience through participatory design and local stewardship. He is also the recipient of the GSAPP Columbia Incubator Prize and the William Keane Fellows Traveling Prize from Columbia University, recognizing his critical engagement with building sciences, urban systems, and allied disciplines. On the behalf of the Complex South Network, I welcome you both. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with you all today. Yes, so we will start soon, but I'm seeing some wonderful colleagues who have joined us, and I hope we can do this more as a conversation. We definitely want to hear your thoughts about what Govi and I are going to say. I hope it'll provoke some thoughts. With that, can we start sharing the screen, please? A shout out to Devanshi also. Bria, many good friends. All right, so yeah, so this has been part of the research that we have been doing for quite some time now, because we think it is so important. It's almost like we have to shift the gears for the world so that we can begin thinking about important things and not just wars. Next. Yeah. So because architecture, urban design, and planning are social acts, so they must have a social purpose. Somehow, since the modernist movement, that was lost. It just became form building, and we want to move that back to where the social purpose is what drives development. Next. So there are three types of wealth, financial, ecological, and social. And in our view, Govi and I talk about that a lot, that financial capital should just be a means to achieving ecological and social capital, which should be our big goals in the world. But right now, the focus is so much on financial capital. So the big message here is that we need triple bottom line accounting for all public and private projects. Can you imagine if the border wall that is being built had to also not only do environmental protection statement, which it didn't do actually, but also a social impact statement. Next. Yeah, so what is social capital? According to the World Bank, it is a glue that holds societies together and without which there can be no economic growth or human well-being. We have actually, because of the ascendance of just financial capital, we have seen so much degradation of social capital in countries like United States. And so the opioid crisis is not a surprise. It's a direct result of the breakdown of social capital. What does social capital include? Trust in each other and in public institutions, which right now is being challenged in many countries, including United States. Social networks and norms. This is like the narrow definition that is often used, but we use a bigger definition that includes community involvement and cohesion, and also no harm to others. If there is a community group that's all for themselves and they hurt others, we don't want to count that as true social capital. Next. So according to Gustavo Petro, the Frankenstein of humanity is in letting the market and greed rule. The cause of climate disaster is capital. There is no total peace without social, economic, and environmental justice. I hope this has become quite evident in all the wars that have gone on in the Middle East and in Ukraine, Russia, and also several wars going on in Africa at that time. There really cannot be total peace without social, economic, and environmental justice. Next. So what do? We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used to create them. So let's change the math. That means count the co-benefits of social and ecological capital. And once again, repeating that our big goal as a society should be to do triple bottom line accounting for all actions, private and public. Next. Why is this urgent? As many of you have read in the newspaper yesterday, at NATO, the NATO countries committed to putting aside or investing 5% of their GDP in what they call defense, but really it's weapons. Uh, this is like the most outrageous statement of policy from NATO or anybody else I heard for a very long time. I was really, really so sad to hear that, because where is this 5% coming from? It's so many NATO countries already said that even 2%, which was the earlier requirement, was too difficult for them because they needed money for education, healthcare, and public services. So now, if it's 5%, all those things are going to suffer. The big crisis in front of us is the climate, is social inequity, and the artificial intelligence, if that goes wild. This Time magazine has an article about an orb which wants to scan your retina and certify that you're a human, because internet is going to change with so many bots creating content and having agency. So if you want to know that this thing was written by a human being, then their retina identification number will be with whatever content they have created. And this is so ridiculous because people can also give their retina ID to a robot. So I think these are the really big things we should be thinking about, trying to make the world safe from AI, with AI, and then solve the, it's an existential problem. Climate change is an existential problem. Why are we not waking up to it? We are sleepwalking into disaster. And 1 billion people may be forced to migrate by 2050 due to climate change, wars, and socioeconomic justice. And we already know how huge impact or a problem that's going to be, because even the Rohingyas in South Asia and other places, I mean, countries don't want migrants, right? What kind of barbed wires and concrete walls will keep migrants out who are desperate to survive and who are risking their life in the Mediterranean just to get out of extreme poverty and violence? So, yes, this is urgent. So let's see. These are big problems, but let's see what is the agency of designers. What can we do? Are we helpless? Let's see next. Yeah, so we design cities, but we also help design policies. And right now, we are not really doing our part very well, because look at the speculative urbanism that is going on in China, in India, in all developing countries. The picture on the right of infinite housing in Mexico, it should totally scare you. And there's a similar project in Brazil. It's actually incentive or inspired by Minha Casa Minha Vida project in Brazil, where the government gives very cheap money to developers to go build social housing, affordable housing. So if your whole point of existence is greed and to make as much money as possible, then you will find the cheapest land way out there, away from the city, no infrastructure, no public transportation, and you will build 6,000 or whatever number housing and get the money and happily go to the bank. What happens to the cities? What happens to the cities when you build gated communities, like the Delhi gated community on your left-hand side? So they are splitting the cities between rich and poor people. And we know from the example of Brazil, cities in South Africa, that when you segregate populations, that leads to serious security issues. That leads to unhappiness on both sides of the fence and distrust, which also then leads to crime. Next. Yeah, so we are designing housing to keep people poor. Why do I say that? The picture on the right is called the ring of misery. Most of our cities now have a ring of misery around them, which means that the wealthy people have the social services, they are in the city, and the new migrants and people who can't afford this or can't afford to live in the city are pushed to the periphery or the suburbs. And so we are making that happen. I mean, how irresponsible is that? Maybe we are not individually designing that, but as a group, what is our agency? What can we articulate and say? Because documentation of these things is activism. Documentation is activism. If you have a client who wants you to build a gated community, you can provide data and arguments to say why the roads, the civil roads, should go through the development and so on. So we do have agency. Um, Next. So what is the solution to speculative housing that keeps pushing people further and further out? So this is one very small example, but it is happening in other places in the world, particularly in Europe as well. This is the Cooper Square Community Land Trust in New York City, where 20 buildings, they made a land trust. So if you make a land trust, no individual actually owns that piece of land, which a developer can buy from you, but it's the community that owns, which makes it very difficult for speculators to come in and erase your building and build something for wealthier people and push you out. So community land trusts are definitely being seen as one possibility. And this is directly related to social capital. Our definition that social capital is people coming together for a common cause. This is it. This is how people can come together for a common cause, own assets collectively, um, be custodians of those um, assets collectively. So we have to go away from just simple greed and simple ownership of land is power. We have to go away from that. Next. This is NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority housing, which was a star of its time. Chicago and New York were so far ahead of other cities and around the world in building substantial high quality social housing. At that time, Towers in the Park was considered high quality. Today, I don't think we would break the New York City grid and then create super blocks and these gated communities for the poor. But at that time, it was considered a very good thing. But then the government policies have actually withdrawn money from maintaining it. So if you don't maintain buildings that are now 50, 60, 70 years old, then obviously these are going to keep on becoming dilapidated. And the only people who still want to live in them are the poor people. So it becomes like, again, a gated community sort of a situation for the poor. Next. Yeah. So, what is the way out of it? Singapore is a very unique city, state, but because they are so small and so homogeneous and so well managed, they can show some good examples. The building on the right is also affordable housing, designed by famous, and on the left also, designed by famous architects, good quality public spaces. They ensure that no building is just for underserved people. So there's always a mix of wealthy and poor people living side by side in the same building. Nobody knows how much somebody is paying for rent. Your neighbor could be, paying a lot more than you, or you could be paying a lot more than your neighbor. But this mixes people in so that there's no separation between the wealthy and the poor. Next. So what is the way forward? So way forward is not be so hung up on ownership of property, ownership of land. If we think about community ownership, suddenly we can find spaces for public spaces and community facilities. So Uber is maybe good and a bad example. because it is, taking away your need to own your car, right? Because a car is this, after the house, is the second most expensive asset people have for their quality of life. But you need a car, you don't need to own it. And Uber and other car services make it possible. Airbnb is saying you don't necessarily need to own an accommodation in every city. Steelcase is saying that if you want to walk on a carpet, you don't need to own it. Let us lease it to you. And when part of it or all of it needs change, we will take away the old one and we will recycle it and then give you the new one. So there's no need to own. I think we have to move beyond ownership. Um, it's better for the environment. It's better for everything. Next. Yeah. Oh, sorry. This picture I already talked about. Next. Okay, so social inequity. Yes, these are not gated communities, but yes, Manhattan super tall buildings are gated communities because they are for the super rich, and of course, there's concierges and doormen down there, and so these buildings that keep popping up, we don't even call them um, residential buildings. We call them parking lots for money because a lot of them are speculative properties owned by millionaires or billionaires in other countries who just want to put their money, park their money safely in the United States, which is actually a tax haven. It welcomes money from abroad without asking if this money came from pornography or terrorism or narcotics or anything. They just want money. That's how, if you're just fixed upon greed, that's what happens. Next. Has anyone been watching Jeff Bezos' wedding? Um, so this is a sign in Venice. So the inequity is like loud and clear and being flaunted by people like Bezos. So I think this is really a time for change. Next. Yeah, extreme inequality. This is people lining up for food bank to get some free food. Next. Yeah. Going back to modernism, where they just forgot about people and architecture became form building and dreaming about automobile cities. Next. Yeah. And Corbusier did more damage to social capital than anyone, although his work is beautiful. Next. And Jane Jacobs stood up at that time, 1961, when a lot of cities were rebuilding after the war, and a lot of suburbs were being built. And she spoke up very boldly in favor of user generated cities, um, people cities. And this was a film in 2017 where I got to say some of the things that I'm saying now. Next. Yeah. So are suburbs going to be the slums of the future if poor people keep on getting pushed as far as possible? And then some of them, like in the United States, don't even have money to put fuel in their cars. But unless they do that, they can't even get to their jobs. So it's really a catch-22 situation. Next. Yeah. And climate. We are not going to be able to solve climate or make climate resilience just with money or with technology. Next. This is New York, Manhattan, of course. But we are going to need social capital to make cities resilient, to manage the managed retreat that in many places we are going to have because of the seawater rise. Next. Yeah, social urbanism. Yes, Colombia is a very good example where they said that our best infrastructure will be in our poorest areas, our best amenities, best architecture, as a big statement. And next slide. And you saw that the more of this stuff was being built, the murder rate came down because uh, Colombia, Medellin was the murder capital of the world, but no more. Next. Very briefly, social capital can help save a lot of money also. This is Catskill watershed in New York, where they were going to build very expensive purification plants, but community came together and said, let us take care of the watershed. We will become custodians of the watershed. And then there was no more need for the expensive purification plant that would have meant rebuilding or refurbishing every 6 years. Next. Yeah, so more and more countries, especially cash-strapped countries like Madagascar, they are enlisting the help of people, the help of social capital to manage the natural assets, which the governments do not have the capacity or money to manage. Next. Yeah, how do you build social capital? Inclusive urbanism, desegregated housing, social infrastructure for everyone, right to work, public spaces, public transportation, trust in government, and trust among people. How do we build cities that can encourage all of these things to happen? Next. Yeah, so I'll give you a very small example of the work of URBS, user-generated cities, and then Govi will talk about specific examples of work that he has done in this. Next. Yeah, so the goal of URBS is to bring community together so that urban development and urban decisions are community generated and community based and inform the developers, inform the governments. Next. So we worked in several places in the world, but most the office is in Mumbai, in the Ravi. I know Ria has been there recently. So yeah, so you see the dichotomy of the formal city, informal city. Calling it a slum is a mistake because it's actually a craft village, but it gets called a slum because the minute you call something a slum, the government has a right to bring in the bulldozers and redevelop it. And the government has been trying to do that for the last 20 years, rather unsuccessfully. There's another big project with Adani happening now. We will see how far it goes next. But we mobilized people to articulate their needs. And all these people on the street, so half the street in this picture is closed, and the Muslims come on Friday night to offer prayers. Um, and then after the prayers, the street is open. It might be closed again for a Hindu festival, Christian festival. That is true social capital. But the Ravi is not seen as a hub of social capital, but rather just expensive piece of land that poor people should not be living on. They should be pushed further out. Next. Yeah, so street-based urbanism, this was an exhibition at MoMA. Street-based urbanism is so much more superior than towers in the park. And this has been proven again and again in informal as well as formal settlements. Next. Yeah. So micro public spaces are as important as macro, bigger public spaces. So we need public spaces at all different levels in order to generate and sustain social capital. Next. Yeah, so with that, let me turn it over to Govi to present the wonderful work he has been doing with water and social capital. Over to you, Govi.
Yep. Thank you, Geeta. Um, so I just want to go a little bit, building off of what Geeta was talking about, social capital, going into the context of Sivakasi, which is my hometown, where I come from. It's located in the southern part of Tamil Nadu, and I'm going to talk about how Sivakasi's uh, indigenous water systems and how that's tied to a social network, and looking at its current state and how we can build back a social network from that. So, Sivakasi is located in the Vaipa River Basin, although the area of Sivakasi will be classified as anywhere between arid and semi-arid. And a part of that is that these water systems were made um, as a way to bring water from the river basin uh, to settlements that were not very closely accessible to water. So they're a series of cascading water tanks, and these were closely tied to the local social network. And just to speak about that, looking at the main river, you have these cascading water tanks that are tied to the local topography. So there is the Erie, which is a form of water irrigation system that supports local farmers in and around the proximity. And what you see here are neerkattis, or they are water managers who understand the local topography and re-articulate the way the water moves based on the needs in different areas. And then you have the Urni, which is again a water catchment system for rainwaters, along with in a lot of places, this is where animals and domestic livestock go for their water needs as well as irrigation needs for farms. And finally, there is the Kulams, which support water needs of small settlements and towns, ranging from drinking water as well as being a central social space for communities. So sorry. A part of this that still exists in this network of water systems is in the context of Chettinad in Tamil Nadu as well, where you can really see that these water tank systems are almost like a sponge holding water due to the limited rainfall these regions receive. Now, going back to the context of my hometown Sivakasi, as like many other cities and towns in the 20th century, it went through intense industrialization. And as part of that, and some of you may be aware, Sivakasi is the pyrotechnic capital of India, almost accounting for 80% of national firework production. And that's a big deal given that Diwali is a significant uh, and a primary Indian festival. So a lot of the livelihood of the small industrial town now depends on fireworks. But a as a cause of industrialization, these water systems were kind of choked out with industrial debris and land acquisition for factories and things like that. And you see a significant difference of what a regional agriculture urban fabric would looks like, which is a lot more porous, as opposed to what Sivakasi's current context looks like. And a lot of these were water tanks. And these were mainly caused from, as Geeta had mentioned, in the case of Dharavi, where what do you say, slums were used as a way of like terming them and then using that to further develop, demolish and develop towers on top of it. In the case of Sivakasi, what happened was these water bodies were kind of choked out by cutting off their connections, and over time they were then reclassified as not anymore a natural asset, and therefore this land was further acquired, then became dumping grounds, and in many cases uh, there were some political um, moves to move that land, and then they were bought out by folks in the neighborhood, which now have built houses on top of them. And due to all this, Sivakasi has lately started to face a critical water scarcity. And uh, and just for context, you do get like public water access maybe once a week, and otherwise you have to rely on private water providers. You really have to like call upon like a water tank to come and provide natural water to your house, and which is such a basic amenity, and the fact that you still need to pay for that is shocking. So lately, on realizing this, a lot of folks in Savakasi, particularly the Green Forum initiative that I want to give a shout out to, looked at how do we revitalize these tanks, as they are such a critical part um, of Savakasi and its urban fabric. So a big part of it was bringing in ways to like decongest the waterways. So as you have the short rainfalls, the water tanks start to fill up. Renaturing the tanks was another thing. And a big part of how they went about doing this was using local members, calling on local assets. Like on one end, you had the Neerkattis who know the local topography really well, and using them as an asset. On the other hand, for the renaturing process, really calling on the younger youth through social media outreach, um, for like planting initiatives, etc. And just to show, this is how Savakasi's the rejuvenation has gone from what I had shown as an earlier picture. And this clearly points out how just using local assets to rejuvenate these water tank system is critical. Oops, sorry. And, uh, although I do want to point that as this rejuvenation effort continued, there was always this piece that how long will this last? And a big part of the work I am trying to do in Savakasi is how do we uh, tap into these social networks that existed before and create one or evolve into one that is more relevant to the 21st century and keep this practice going on where this is not just a one-time effort that dies down over time. So a big part of this study was looking at urban porosity in the context of Sivakasi, really integrating um, agriculture, different social assets like playgrounds and markets as part of this water system being at the center of it, and tapping into local social assets. So here we took the opportunity to map out local assets like street vendors who could be custodianships of the water bodies, or even having identifying agricultural land which can still be used for local agriculture purposes even in light of industrialization. And uh, and then as you see here, this is the connecting bodies that had been cut out, and really finding ways how do we have the local communities taking care of this water body so it's long lasting. And just some vision of how this could be and integrating at the very grassroots level. So in the context of India, like a a dhobi ghat or a place where people go for the clothes to be washed is such a critical part of our society. So how can Adobe Guard be integrated with this water system? So is there a way where they have their source of water from here at the same time they become custodians of um, the water body, taking care of its upkeep and making sure it doesn't go through the process of draining out. And in the other way, we had identified a few agricultural land that can be used again for agriculture purposes, giving local produces, and at the same time, the water is a critical part of this agriculture, and creating the symbiotic relationship between the farmers and the water bodies. So as a whole, in as part of the GSAP Incubator Prize, we're looking as a first step to create awareness, engage with the local communities, and in the long run, um, integrate the idea of these water tanks and how they're taken care as part of the local education system, and creating social capital through that. So for multiple generations to follow, it remains as a strong social network and creating community custodianship through that. Uh, yeah, now I'd like to hand off to Geeta to talk about the wonderful social capital initiatives.
Thank you. Thank you, Govi. So, as you have seen, that are really big, important ecological assets, whether it's water, whether it's forests, whether it is coastal areas. Uh, I think they can no longer be just left to the government to manage, because so many governments do not have the capacity or the money to do that. So, bringing in people, um, capitalizing on their social capital is actually the critical need for the moment. And as I showed in some of the examples, that is what is happening in either in Madagascar or in many other countries. But we have to think that energizing or organizing and then leveraging social capital is what can save the forests in Amazon or in the Himalayas or Indonesia or coastal areas, particularly wetlands. which are such an important asset. And as we showed that the once in the dry season, the wetlands relatively dry off, then they can be actually considered, oh, well, this is not useful land, so let's build on it. And the government in India has actually been quite guilty of building on these wetlands and water bodies. So when you see flooding, it's really rather man-made flooding. But we just need to understand that that's the not the issue, not the way to solve this issue. So let me talk a little bit about social capital initiatives. This is the other nonprofit that I co-founded 25 years ago. Several of our board members, junior board members, are on in the audience, so a big shout out to them. Next. Yeah, we just turned 25 years old, and one thing we developed together is SOCS, the community currency for social good, because as Gobi mentioned, that yes, people need to come together, but a lot of times people in the most vulnerable areas that need to be protected are the poorest people. So you can't just say that, okay, you are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs to make ends meet, and now you are also the custodian of this water body. Can we incentivize them? So SOX is actually a method of incentivizing social good. As the diagram on the left shows, you do social good, you earn SOX and you spend them on your own education, upskilling, livelihood, or microcredit, or whatever the community decides. Next. And we have an app, people earn SOX for doing the good things. Next. And they can then redeem them for what they need. So, what can architects and planners do that we can incentivize in this fashion? Build public spaces so people can be incentivized to co design public spaces and then manage them and program them. SOCs can be traded in for bus fare, bus for education, for healthcare. All projects start with Socratic dialogues where the communities articulate what is it that they want, and then that goes on the menu, which is on the previous slide. And then people earn socks, they go into their app. And so it's a way of incentivizing social good. But the biggest thing is it brings communities together to think about what they need and what are they willing to do about that. Next. So we are working in several countries, have received several prizes. Next. This is a Socratic dialogue happening in Washington, D.C. Um, Next. This was in Anacostia. This is in Pune, where we had the issue was truck drivers. There were lots of accidents because the truck drivers were having to drive for very long times without sleep. And this was a project with another organization to see how that can be improved. And these are all truck drivers giving their advice. And we design games which help to come up with the menus. Next. This is in Taiwan, where SOX is being used to incentivize farmers to promote biodiversity and use their indigenous methods of preserving water and preserving forests, which were all under attack because of new technologies that don't really think very long term sometimes. And so SOCs are incentivizing farmers to do that. Next. This is in Jefferson Housing, one of the NYCHA projects. We did this with the American Institute of Architects, working with people to see where the public spaces can be improved with better lighting, better access, better line of sight to make them safer and more usable. Next. These are some ideas that some of our team members at Asia Initiatives designed. for the NYCHA housing. Next. Next. This is another NYCHA. So more than 400,000 people live in NYCHA housing, actually. So it's a very big part of New York. And so it really, really urgently has to be improved, sustained, made more livable, made more safe, and not so stigmatized. Next. Yeah, so this is an example in Mumbai, incentivizing, turning a very tight alley in. So the picture on the left is rather depressing because when they tear down slums, or that may have looked like the Ravi, 1 or 2 story buildings and lots of air and sunshine, they build these concrete 10-floor towers with very little space in between them. So they are dark, dingy, very little breeze blowing through. So they're actually much worse in terms of quality of life than the original informal settlements people were moved to. But then there is hope if people come together and begin to care for their public spaces. Next. So we are also incentivizing rainwater harvesting structures in Bundelkhand, Maharashtra, very, very dry areas. And when people come together, and especially women, we have seen amazing things happen. And when the community is involved in building these and co-designing them, then they get maintained. If the community is not involved, then after some time they silt and are they become useless. Next. Yeah, so this was our idea in Vaigai River in Madurai to clean up the riverfront and protect it from further encroachment by making. So we divided the riverfront into several segments, and the community behind it became custodians of that part of the riverfront. So they wouldn't let construction debris be dumped in the river or sewage coming into the river. Next. Yeah, so this is the last slide, but we want to say that the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals are about social capital, ecological capital, and financial capital. And the world is right now so fixated on financial capital, but doesn't it should really not be. And if you see the big picture of the big crisis in front of us, then you see that we really need to understand financial capital just as a way to enhance social and ecological capital. So let me stop there. And we would love to have the participants ask questions, challenge what we are saying, and advise us on the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Geeta and Govardhan, for that insightful presentation. It was really interesting because you did have a very positive twist to the things that we've often been worried about, thinking about. And you're absolutely right when you say that, the same level of thinking that we've had in the past will not give us the results for the new bigger problems that we have. It is really, really interesting. I can see that our list of attendees have quite a lot of students as well. So this presentation was indeed a treasure trove of examples for them to kind of delve deep into. So thank you very much, Govardhan, for that hands-on case study of Shivakashi as well. Like it hits differently when it's closer home to see that, and to Professor Geeta for the Socratic SOC method. It's refreshingly different to see that there are initiatives that have been tried and tested, which really work, and which kind of brings the social capital to the forefront. So with that, I think we can now open the doors for Q&A. Uh, the participants may not have access to the mic at the moment, but if you raise your hands, there is a raise button there, on the panel that you would see on Teams. If you do that, maybe we can give you access to unmute, switch on your camera, and ask the question so that this becomes much more of an interactive Q&A rather than just me or Binti, doing the talking. Sure. Thank you very much. To start with, I think we do have a few questions in the chat box. Maybe I can read them out first. So the first question is about, I think this is with regards to the case study that and Govardhan showed. It was about how do you think that the youth could be mobilized for such efforts? What would be the incentives for the youth to kind of do it? Thank you.
I think very specifically speaking in the context of Sivakasi, how we incentivized the youth was there was a lot of I would say we gained some social media traction through this and a lot of reach out and education to people on what could be, like giving them a vision of, oh, this is what the water system could be. And some of the engagement also was talking to people who have actually used the water bodies before it dried up, like which I'm talking about my grandfather's generation, and using that as quotes and engaging with the younger generation, being like, this is what it used to be, and this is what it could be for you. And a lot of them were actively willing to be engaged and be part of it because they wanted a form of a social environment for them to either engage with their friends or the community. And having the ability to do that by participating in this, a lot of people were willing to do it, but it involved really showing them a vision for it. And I think Ray also had a comment. It wasn't about teaching them, but also listening to a lot of folks who have engaged with this water body before, and then just passing on that message to the younger generation really helped a lot.
Sure. And thank you very much. I guess there's a question from Rucha. Richa, probably you could unmute and ask. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Sandeep. I'm juggling between some work, so I just posted the question. But I think I can ask my question. Thank you so much for such a thoughtful presentation, both Geeta and Gopi. And it's wonderful to. And I live in DC, and I have a lot of interest working in. I come from Mumbai. I work in India and in North America. And I wanted to. The one question I had was through the projects or the work that you shared, can either or both of you talk about like one or two key change agents or champions that y'all encountered, like the surprising ones within governing agencies? Maybe they're strapped with resources or they're just stuck in red tape systems that really sort of helped you or help the work or the programs transform them into reality. So any sort of specific stories or sort of these surprising champions that came up in your work over the years through any of the projects that you all shared? I'd love to hear that. Thank you.
Govi, do you want to start, please?
Sure. I think a big surprising one for me, again in Sivakasi, the work I've done was having industrialists actually back and support this work. Um, and one of them who also had a much more technical understanding of the water systems, who owns multiple factories in the region, actually stepped in and helped develop an entire GIS survey of the region, which I think was a very critical base for us to work on. And initially, I was always curious, like what incentivized him into doing it. But he very clearly mentioned that although the industry is what Sivakasi is associated with, the community and the society has lost its character over time, just because these water bodies were not just infrastructure for us, but they were also a key social gathering space, which does not exist anymore. And he feel like us, like being in the position where you do have some financial capital on your end to support these initiatives, he felt was a great starting point. And I really appreciate the support from them for that.
Yeah, for me, I want to give a shout out actually to many government officials we worked with, because the normal saying is, oh well, the government officials don't really have the vision or the power to participate, but that's not true. Because every now and then, actually, I think the role of nonprofits and architects and designers is to create models and create alternative ways of thinking and doing things. And eventually the scale up has to come from the government, right? The policies have to come from the government. And again and again, we have seen visionary people in the government who see what we are doing and then they want to scale it up. One example is in Gaya, Bihar, where we started a cascade of learning system for a very poor education system there. Actually, in government schools was really stressed and not working so well. So we had this peer mentoring system called Cascade of Learning, and we started in 14 schools. And then, the government saw the results, the data that we could show at the end of 2 years. And then they said, okay, come and do it in 200 more schools. So now from 14, we went to 214. This kind of scale up cannot really happen with nonprofits or just by thinking about it. It has to be government and policy. Exact same thing happened to us in Rajasthan also, where from a small project, we in 10 villages, we are now in 50 villages. So yeah, I think they are champions at all levels, at the level of volunteers, of students. I love teaching because my students always have such great ideas and I'm learning from them all the time. So yeah, they're champions everywhere. Yeah.
Thanks you both for sharing those thoughts. And my personal experience has been that it's taking that step and reaching out to everyone along with communities and all other stakeholders that may or may not be responsive to what you're trying to do, but there are always these surprises where I'm like, oh my god, this official who I did not think had the time or interest in what we're trying to do here is actually so willing and so progressive and forward thinking to support this idea or even talk to me. And I think for anyone who here in the younger generation, I would really encourage you to go out there in the communities, whether it's people or officials or practitioners, to go out and share your ideas, and you'll always be surprised by how much you'll be motivated by people actually willing to support you in these interventions. So thanks to you both for sharing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Richa. So we do have another question from Ketki, taking this forward. Ketki, you can ask the question. We've given you the, or if you want me to read it out, I could do that as well.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Ketki.
Hi, thank you. Uh, Actually, my question partly is already answered, but I would still go ahead and ask. And thank you so much for the great presentation that you presented today. It's some very inspiring work. And I have been associated with herbs for about 7, 8 years now, and I really appreciate the community-led development that this practice has offered, and it's greatly inspired my own practice as well. So I wanted to ask is that there is there's a growing recognition in terms of the importance of community custodianship in ecological conservation, and communities are not, but we always also see that communities are not always homogeneous. They often have internal hierarchies. There are conflicts of interest, and that may not align with the broader environmental or collective goals. And so I wanted to know from your experience or any other cases that you would like to tell us about, how do we navigate this complexity, acknowledging social capital, but while addressing these internal conflicts of interest. And when communities are aligned, how can we effectively bring government authorities on board to scale and support these bottom-up initiatives? So I think partly you already spoke about that, but yeah, I'll be really interested. Thank
Okay, let me start and then Gobi, you can please jump in. Thank you very much, Ketki. Wonderful that you are so closely associated with herbs. Great to know. Yes, I think that you ask a very important question. That let's say that the community is mobilized and they have a certain need and they have a certain aspiration and even a plan. However, that may not be the good thing for the entire community, right? It may be just for, like in the Ravi is a place of 90 distinct communities. So let's say some of them came together for something that's good for them, but maybe not for the rest of the Ravi. Or the Ravi came up with, or people in Kodiwala came up with something that may not be good for the bigger picture. So how do you make sure that it's a win-win for everybody, right? And it's a negotiation for everybody. And that really is about articulating, even working with the smaller community to articulate, yes, this is what you need and this is what you're willing to do, and this will be the bigger result. Or can you alternatively uh, design your thinking or your project in a way that also benefits everyone else? And I think this is a really when the resources are scarce, whether it is land, whether it is water, then I think how do you share it? How do you share a scarce resource in an equitable manner that doesn't hurt people outside your community also, right? So I think that this is a very complex, hard question you have asked, and it's about negotiation. You use the word like, okay, bottom up, right? Yes. So it really should be bottom up and top down, people coming to the same table in a genuine way, and open to solutions that will maybe not give them everything they want, but enough so that it's a win for them and win for the bigger picture also. So yeah, I think architects and planners also have to be diplomats. Govi, do you want to add something to it?
Yeah, and I think especially Geeta, in the end, I think what you said exactly encapsulates what I was going to say as well. Um, and just to recollect, like maybe around 5 6 years ago, when I really wanted to start engaging with my hometown, I went with this grand vision, thinking, oh, I know everything on what is best for the community. But then while going down, I think you're humbled by how much knowledge uh, the local community actually has. And that's when you realize, like, you went in this like approach of master planning, like you really wanted to give your vision of what you think was beneficial for the community. But then you realize it is all about the discourse. It's not like bottom up or top down. It's really all of you coming to the table, like how Geeta said, and talking about it, negotiating. And on my end, I always have learned to keep this vision, what I want to, help them achieve, very malleable. So you can always negotiate and evolve as it goes to a community vision at the end of the day.
Yeah, we always say that people who are closest to the problems are also closest to solutions, and proximity is expertise, right? So it has to, we have to respect that, and that should be an important part of the conversation. Thank you for asking that big question.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, KK. And thank you, Professor Mehta and Govardan, for answering that. Over to Ulysses. Yeah, over to you, Ulysses.
Thank you. Thank you for a really inspiring talk. I mean, the examples that you provided, which demonstrate the kind of operationalization of some of these bottom-up possibilities, is really one of the takeaways for me, because there's a lot of identification of problems, but you're actually pointing us towards solutions that are leading to genuine outcomes. You asked us to try and also provoke you a little bit, and I'm wondering if that's okay. The question is an academic one. So the question is based on the presentation I saw today. Obviously, this is a very small window into your work, both of you. I refer to both of you. You started with the sort of three different kinds of, let's call it three different areas that interact. And the third one was ecological capital. And the work that you presented today, for me at least, and so you can come back to me on this, still treats the natural environment, or the environment plus the natural environment, if you want to separate them, as a resource in the context of sort of ecosystem services. So it's basically around an anthropological framework where there are these resources. We want to see how we can equitably access them or distribute them. And my question really is there a reframing that you are undertaking that I have not yet seen in your presentation, which moves beyond that paradigm, so that the ecosystem or environmental capital is not treated purely as a resource which is then sort of distributed more equally or retained or maintained, but is something that has got a more dynamic relationship with these communities and social capital, so that there's a mutual growth possibility, mutual agency, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, let me start. Govi, or do you want to start?
I mean, I have just a short thought that came to my mind as you were mentioning this is, at least to me, the ecological assets is like the binding glue at this point, really bringing the community together. And I mean, in an ideal world, there is this form of coexistence that would happen. But I feel like that only comes from the more communities engage with ecology and stop treating it as an infrastructure that we have done over the past century, and instead move towards as a living system that you are in more in a symbiotic relationship. Um, Definitely a long way for us to go there, but I think initiating this initial interaction is a critical step towards it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Quite informative. Thank you.
Ulysses, I think that your question is the question actually of the day. That is really the question. That is nature there to serve us? Is nature there to be exploited and to put economic value on? And that this is like a huge discussion and a dangerous discussion. Because in some of our work, people have talked about payment for ecosystem services, right? That if the poorest people are in the most vulnerable area, that needs to be protected. So if you pay them to protect that, right, then those poor people should get paid to protect that asset for the rest of community, right? Then the really big question is, can you actually put value on water, on air, on oceans? I mean, what kind of value can you even put? But that's where it's at, right? Like right now in the United States, the environmental laws are being repealed, right?
Yes.
That, okay, we want to be the biggest oil producer, so go frack, go do whatever you have to do, whether it's in Alaska or it's in, national protected areas. So that's because of thinking about one capital, that is financial capital, and ignoring social and ecological capital. Nothing is possible if you don't respect and serve ecological capital, right? So it's should we even call it environmental capital, right? That's the first issue. I mean, it's so much bigger. What value can you even think of putting it on? But then at the micro level, like the example that Govi showed so well, at the micro level, if you bring communities, social capital and environmental capital, let's say water in the case of Govi's example, and then there is this whole history of the area Govi is working on, where every drop of water could be harvested and used, and in very dry areas, agriculture could happen. So bringing that history back into it and bringing people and environment together at that scale, Yes, that's definitely what needs to happen. And education and understanding have a big role to play in that. But on the macro level, at the global level, how do you put value on environmental capital in a way that it's not exploitative, right? I mean, that's like a question everybody should be thinking about right now and trying to answer. And thank you for asking that. And I'd love to hear your comments on that.
I just want to add
I
one
think that.
thing, Geeta.
Thank,
Uh,
thank you. Sorry, is that you, Sandeep?
That's
oh,
Gobi.
oh, I just
Go
wanted to
go
add
ahead,
just
please.
one point. When Geeta spoke about micro, um, I think a instance I want to talk about is there was a point when, like I'd shown in the video, how when the water bodies were rejuvenated, there was this initiative by a few folks. They're like, oh, we should bring back like the marine ecosystem, right? So adding in some fish voluntarily and seeing how that thrives. And that was followed by a few community members being like, oh yeah, and then we should just fish them, and that becomes a whole cycle. Which we push back a lot because we were like, no, this has a much more important piece in the ecosystem, and it's important that we don't exploit it. At the same time, another person had this initiative of just documenting the different birds that have started to come back once the tanks were rejuvenated, and we really supported that. So I think it's a little bit at that point negotiating with community members on what is the like. It's almost like baby steps we take forward on how do you see, because it's been um, we've been, I think, ingrained to think of ecological as like we exploit it, and there is a lot of unlearning we need to do before we actually move towards a world where we can actually live with the ecosystem without exploiting them.
Thank you. I mean, both your answers were informative for me. I, there's no magic wand I can wave back at you. The reason I asked the question is because of our own limitations and in what we are trying to explore. The only perspective I have is very short. So in sort of one sentence, one of the major limitations that we are trying to address is the lack of cognition of longer term or midterm environmental outcomes based on the actions that you take today. So that's one of the ways in which I don't think that's particularly separated from what you talked about, which is you have to have an initial starting point where the social and the ecological come together. But it might be an interesting discussion. Yeah. Thank you for your answer.
And a big discussion to be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ulysses, for asking that question. I had the same thought in my head while I was seeing the presentation. So, but you articulated it so well. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, Professor Mehta and Govardan, for answering it and also starting a series of new questions, which probably we can take it up as a discussion later on. We do have a question from Samson, who asks, are there any systems of quantification of social capital at a city level? So I have made Samsung a presenter, so they have the the agency to unmute and ask as well if I didn't articulate it properly. Thank you.
I think that's Samir, That is Samir Unale.
Oh, under an alias. Good. So are there any
Yeah,
systems of quantification of social capital at city level?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because if you can't measure something, you cannot manage it, right? And the same thing applies for social capital, and the same thing applies for environmental capital, right? Do we actually know how to measure the environment? And as you might recall, the word environment even came into being in 1972. Nobody was using that word before that. There was this big conference in Stockholm and they didn't know what to call it, but there was acid rain happening. So they said, oh, all right, so let's call it the environmental conference. And then the word took off because it was so needed. So then the question becomes, at that time, the issue was, well, how are we going to measure it? And now we kind of know how to measure it. We know how to measure seawater rise. We know how to measure carbon dioxide in the air. We can measure pollution. So that has become much more measurable in some way, but not in the macro way. And social capital is exactly at that point now. How do you measure it? And our development of social capital credits was actually exactly to respond to that, because we were asking people in our villages, remote villages, urban slums, to do certain things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And but community said, and we said, that those are good things, right? So then SOX became a way to measure social capital credits, which we call SOX, became a way to measure social capital, because X number of trees, 70,000 trees have been grown and this much water has been saved. We were actually just shortlisted for a award, Keeling Curve Prize, where they asked us, well, how many, how much carbon dioxide have you saved from this new method of rice cultivation that doesn't emit so much methane? So yes, we had to scrounge around and find formulas to calculate that. But yeah, so SOX was a way to really begin to calculate it. Uh, I don't think there are numbers to calculate social capital, but there are indices. You know, there are many indices out there now that you can begin to say, okay, this was met. These are the KPIs, key performance indicators, and this much of it has been done, half of it, or 10% or something. So these are approximate ways to measure. But also, equating everything with money to measure it is a really dangerous way to go about it. And in our world today, when everything seems to, people want to measure in money, that I think we have to resist that, and we have to provide alternatives for that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Mehta, for that, because I think the question that's Mr. Samir Runale raised was a really, really pertinent one. That that anything that can be measured is what kind of gets protected, right? That's what gets taken care of. So it's really important, and I'm glad that you did mention the flip side of it as well. Measuring everything against an economic indicator, because it somehow seems that in our capitalist world that it's oh, how much does it cost? Like, even if it's biological indicators, which are essential for our survival. But at the end of the day, when there is a monetary value to it, a monetary value of nature, that's when it gets protected. Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much for addressing it. So I'll probably now we have scout the board. I don't think there are any more questions. There are some observations, very pertinent ones from Rhea. If Rhea is around, if I
No,
can.
she had to leave actually. Rhea had
Oh,
to
did
leave.
she? Okay, sure. So in that case, I can hand over the mic to Binti to kind of take this forward. Thank you so much. Over to you, Binti.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll just read out what Rhea has written. And okay, just to add that Samir is a city commissioner. He is currently heading the portfolio of Directorate of Municipal Administration in Mumbai. He was formerly the CEO of Thane Smart City. He and I have written a book together, and Samir is a sociologist, but he is very much into uh, the urban discourse, and he likes to understand what academics are thinking. He likes to dialogue with us. So that question came from partly from his position of understanding and tackling day-to-day administrative problems as to how to quantify such sociological concepts. Uh, just to think about social capital, Robert Putnam was initially gave this idea of bridging social capital versus bonding social capital, and partly in our book, the book where even Sandeep was a contributor, Sandeep Manoj Parmar was there, and Tanya Berger, where we argue that negotiating resilience with hard and soft city, where we kind of argue that how the hard city has failed us, and the 15 case studies from Africa, India, Europe. validate that argument, and how communities from all these places are working on social capital, community networks, in order to build resilience for themselves, resilience against climate, resilience in the face of climate disasters and natural disasters. Um, so the argument is that it must be integrated. I mean, as Putnam argues, that it is bridging social capital, which is more profitable than bonding social capital, because bridging is about bringing diverse geographies, diverse backgrounds together. So it kind of equalizes and democratizes the process. It's more inclusionary, whereas bonding is where people of similar backgrounds roam about, and they dine together, they eat together, and they frame policies together. So something that even Ananya Roy says, that why informal, when in the context of informality in Indian cities, that informality is just not at the bottom level, it is also at the higher levels. What she means is that the social capital, the schools that we go to, the kind of friends that we have, that kind of, for example, I mean, people went to Doon School, or the policymakers of yesteryears went to Doon School, and they are sitting in government. So they have a club, the kind of function like a club. So that is not the social capital imagination we have here. The social capital imagination that we have here is more about bridging social capital, where we try to bridge these gaps and make it more equalizing, more inclusive, and things like that. So coming back to negotiating resilience in with hard and soft city, we also bring this argument that uh, the hard city is kind of not enough. It is kind of failing us. And that is why social capital and social networks, community networks, cultural practices, people's practices are important. If, because it ultimately it is these things that are invisible, that is outside the formal sphere, but these are the ones which is helping people to build bottom of the pyramid citizens to build resilience for themselves. But what we see today are initiatives, as you said, Professor Mehta and Govardhan. The thing is that you have seen there are officers out there who are trying to, build into this narrative, who are trying to work with you. And in that regard, we also have two important initiatives, even in the case of India. One is the CSR, corporate social responsibility, and the new thing is ESG, which is environmental and social governance. Uh, so that's my question to you. How do you think that these two, which is more percolated to the corporations, more in the form of disclosures for corporates and banks, green bonds, and things like that, which is more catering to elite clientele, people who are educated, people who are aware, how do you think you can bring these two kinds of, how do you think these two kind of initiatives can help build bridging social capital? My question was very long, but and that's the question that I wanted to come to.
Right, right. Govi, do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
You can go ahead, Geeta.
Okay, so and then please you add, Govi. So I think CSR in India, corporate social responsibility, is such a brilliant program, truly brilliant, that companies above a certain level of income and revenue are obliged to give, what is it, 3%, right? 3% or 2 point some percent of their profits.
Yeah, 2%.
Yeah. Of their profits for good causes, right? And actually, some of our project, like our vegetable garden project in Maharashtra, serving 4,000 people, women, is actually funded by a CSR entity, a private company. So I think a lot of good is happening. It was a brilliant idea to channel all this corporate wealth into good causes, supporting nonprofits. And as you know, nonprofit sector in India is very, very vibrant, little bit under threat right now, but very vibrant still. There is as is kind of expected, some of the CSR money actually flows into causes that also have political support or goes into somehow gets politicized. But leaving that aside, I think it's a great program. ESG, bringing governance into it, is, of course, very much needed. And I want to go back to your mentioning about Robert Putnam and his bridging and bonding capital. Yes, indeed, it's about bridging, not just between communities that are wealthy or not wealthy, communities that are threatened and not threatened, like ecological, communities on coastal areas facing climate threats, climate catastrophes, and bridging between them and communities that are on a higher land. How can you bridge them? We actually start from this definition and then we broaden the definition to include both of these capitals, bonding and bridging, but also look for ways to bridge beyond uh, beyond immediate, obvious differences. And that's when I mean that, let's say refugees who are going to be dislocated from Sundarbans, can we connect them to cities higher up in India or in Bangladesh? I think that's the kind of bridging capital that is really needed right now. And to your point, which is excellent, there's not that many mechanisms yet. Every community that is safe from seawater rise is sort of acting like a fort and not wanting refugees, climate refugees, or people facing starvation because their farms are gone or salinated. So I think those are the big questions, Dr. Binti, you have asked about how can we make this bridging capital more powerful? And can we legislate it? Can we create policy measures to facilitate that? Right now, they don't exist, but I think they need to exist. Can we, then coming back to SOX and the idea of incentivization, can we incentivize people in the Rust Belt of United States, for example, where factories that are lying vacant because all the production has gone to China, then can we incentivize those people to allow migrants to come in there because the infrastructure is there, the buildings are there, the empty houses are there? It would make a lot of sense, right? People from the coastal areas who are being threatened able to come. And do we need to incentivize these people? How does bridging capital work? I don't really have an answer to the wonderful questions you asked, but those are some thoughts I want to put on the table. Yeah.
And just
Thank
to
you.
add, a little to that, although uh, in the context of some of the work I've taken up, one thing I have wanted to engage with my hometown is it is an industrial town, and being mainly into pyrotechnics, I think it's in a vulnerable space, specifically given the growing awareness around pollution and how that has an impact on the industry at large. So I feel like ESG is one way, and hopefully in the future we would like to engage with the industries. Is that a pathway of transitioning the city as a whole, because it not only affects the industrialists but also every single person, because the whole city is tied to the industry. So
Yeah.
using ESG as a way of transitioning out and policy frameworks to help Savakasi transition from very highly reliant on the pyrotechnic industry to other forms of I know sustainable practices. I'm not sure what that holds. And like Geeta pointed out, I think social incentives will be a way for it to build that ground up support to lead to this transition over the next few decades.
Okay. So Ria writes that I think ESG and CSR can support grassroots community driven change, but only if implemented with intention and accountability to the communities they aim to serve. Too often, these frameworks remain at the level of metrics and disclosures, serving institutional reputations more than the lived realities on the ground. There is no need for more accountability and transparency. And before that, Ria posed another comment. I will read out from the chat. Yeah. She says, one quick thought after listening to the presentation, meaningful community engagement means listening, not preaching. It's about learning from people, not telling them what to do. Engagement has to go beyond checking a box. It needs to genuinely incorporate community feedback. We need to move up Sherry Amsten's ladder of participation beyond tokenism towards real partnership. Also, the disconnect between affordable housing and transportation is critical. These developments are often pushed to the outskirts with poor access to jobs, schools, and services. Social capital can really help bridge that gap. So, yeah, my question was in continuation to Ria's reflection. This is more about bridging social capital. I think I have already asked that question and you have answered that. So, I think the larger question is also about the question of because we are operating within this framework of industrial, post-industrial capitalism, advanced capitalism. So, I think there, and we are not really questioning that. So, I think part of our problem lies in the very way that we valorize the things. And we really need to bring about maybe ESG, CSR, and these things, but they are so minuscule that, until we frame this legislatively, I'm not sure how much impact they are going to have on larger society because given the fact that we have very good examples around us. We also have, so I keep referring to the film Erin Brockovich to my students and kind of telling them that it's an inspirational movie that we can go back to at a time when nothing was there. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I just have to, I'm just so tempted to bring the example of BlackRock. It's one of the biggest financial companies in the United States. And they made a decision several years ago that, okay, we are only going to fund projects that have ESG, right?
Okay.
And so we were, oh, wow, that's great, that's great. But guess what happened? Their shareholders rebelled and they said, no, this is not allowed. You are a company and your only job is to give us more, find us more money, make more money for us. You're not allowed to do ESG.
Yeah.
They had to retract. And that was like such a devastating thing because this idea of greed and, that the job of company is simply to make money is so entrenched and it really, really, really needs to be challenged. That was like a landmark case and heartbreaking at the same time. I just thought I'd throw that out, but thank you.
No, that's very important. I mean, so all your good efforts and all the great impact that we are having on society, your work is bringing on society. And how do we actually inspire the youth? How do we bring more and more people? How do we mobilize support for such actions? These are and especially for the upcoming designers because our classes are shrinking. Not many people in India are interested to study architecture. They are not interested to study urban design simply because they don't see any power in it. And it's a tough call for us as teachers to kind of hold them together and hold their attention and to give them some kind of hope that, well, they can make some changes. They can, and that change is possible through good design. Uh, but your lecture was very inspiring. I think they have noted a thing or two and they will try to implement those ideas in their own design interventions, no matter how small they are, no matter how basic they are. One has to be a little brave. One has to take that the first kind of step. Uh, Otherwise, there's not much that we can do. But collectively, yes, I think Putin's idea of bridging social capital, which he wrote sometime in the 1970s, still holds a lot of relevance in today's day and age, where society has become so divisive and fragmented, I think the idea of social capital holds a lot of value, and this very definition of capital to be turned on its head from what is just a capital as financial capital measured in terms of money, monetary terms, and not something else. So, this question of valorization, what do we value as a society? And sustainability is something that we value as a society. Sustainable development goals is something that we have all obliged to as nations of the world. So, I think, thank you very much, Professor Geeta Mehta and Govardan, for your insights, for giving your time and this wonderful webinar, sharing with us. We would love to have more from you, some more insights about your methods, about your specific cases in each of the contexts that you have just touched upon today. We would want to know more from you about how you went about from point A to point B, and the methods that you deployed is something that we would be very interested, and our students will also be interested. This entire episode will be uploaded in our Complex South YouTube channel, and it will also be shared on the social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj, for joining in. Thank you very much. Bye.